Hello and welcome to another edition of our solo jazz piano internet tutorial. Last week we covered halftime bass lines and half notes, and today I would like to get to what is usually called the essence of a jazz rhythm section. It's the walking bass line. The walking bass line works in quarter notes, not half notes as last time. And so, since we're playing quarter notes, if the changes are on the one of each bar, we have 4 notes to fill instead of 2. So that gives us a lot more variety, but also a lot more to think about in the left hand. Now let's see what happens if the changes are like every half bar, every 2 beats. Then we have essentially the same situation as we had with half note bass lines. Namely, we're going to play the roots on the 1 and 3 of each bar, and we'll play either a chord tone or a passing tone in between. So we have essentially 3 possibilities. Either the chords run in the circle of fifth. Let's just take a 2-5-1-6 for example. So, in order to go from the D minor to the G, you have the possibility of either going root 5, root 5, new root, 5, root. Passing tone, root 5, root 5, root 5, and root again. Other possibility would be to use thirds as an approach. Passing tone, this is third, third, root, third, root, third, root. Next alternative that's very close to that is to use chromatic passing tones. Root. Never mind the major third here. Chromatic from below. You could also go chromatic from above. So that's essentially all the possibilities we have. Now, if the chords go stepwise down, like let's say hit the road jack. You can either play 2 roots or you go chromatically down. Or you could do a root 5 motion, although that's pretty awkward. could do the root in the octave. Now here's a nice alternative. Good then. Now what if our changes go in full measures, not just half measures, but we need to fill a full bar. Then on the count 1 of the bar, we of course play the root. Then on bars 2 and 3, we fill with chord tones or with scale material. And our beat 4 is our approach to the next root that's coming on the following one. So, how can we do that? We can take again our 2-5-1-6. We could go either in chord material, approach, chord material, 5th down. Mainly chord material, approach, scale, scale, so how does this work? To go from the D to the G, we can either walk upward. Note that I didn't play. If you need a chromatic, you put this in last. Make the big steps between 1 and 2 and make the small steps later on. If you go downward from the D to the G, very easy. You just play downward. No need for a chromatic here. So we can also use the scale material. Now we're past the G, so we go down a half step, and down here we are. Likewise, downward motion, chord material, approach, there we are. Wonderful. And now there's also other alternatives that we can use. We can put jumps in there. Like we play the root, and between the root on the 1 and the next note there's a big jump. And then from then on the skips or steps become progressively smaller as we go toward the new root. So that would be, for example, same thing, I'm going from the D to the G. Octave, back to the 5th, approach, there I am. I could also do this downwards. Octave, chord tone, approaching, there I am. I could also use a 6 as a jump. Downward 6, past the target note, down, there I am. I could also go upward, leap, approach. I need another note, just go back, and here I am. Good, these are bass lines with the jumps. Now, when we go stepwise, you can easily put the root on 3 again and then make your approach. Like for example, let's hit the road jack again, stepwise bass motion. I could also jump to the fifth and then approach. Good then. Now what happens if our changes happen only every other bar? Like for example, let's take How High the Moon. It starts with 2 bars of a G major 7th. Then in order to not sound repetitive, I would choose the 5th as my note that I play on the 1 of the 2nd bar of the G major 7th. So that would make 5th, now I have changes every bar, but this puts me in that dilemma again. 2 bars of F major 7th. 5th, right? I could also go and play just a chord arpeggio that also works nicely. That's very similar to those rock and roll bass lines that we all know. Or boogie woogie. Right? Now, a few notes on how to play those walking bass lines. First of all, don't play too high. They really don't have an effect if you're in that range. So I would say stick to the lower 2.5 octaves of the piano. Like a regular string bass player would play, this is the string bass lowest note. Like in the lowest 2 octaves. That's where we also should stay with our bass lines. Compare this. Got a nice bottom to it. If I try it up here. It sounds kind of meh. It's not really cutting it, but down here is really nice. Another thing that you can do is to leave space between the notes, because on a string bass the note has a lot of attack, but then it decreases in volume very quickly. Of course, our piano bass notes hold on forever. So if we try to imitate a string bass by playing legato, we're not going to be very successful. But if I go has a lot more oomph to it. So this is what I suggest, especially if you want something to swing hard. Do this exercise. Play alternatingly the bass note on the downbeat and the chord on the offbeat. if you do that, and you leave just that little last triplet eighth out here, then you have just about the right amount of space to make it swing really hard. Now, how you can also fill up those spaces is by playing kicks with your thumb. Your thumb essentially acts like the snare drum of a drum kit. It makes an offbeat accent. It doesn't really matter what notes you play, because it's more of a rhythmic effect than it's really something melodic. I usually use roots and fifth. I think that's most effective. It doesn't disturb, it doesn't detract, but it gives that nice kick. Make these short. It's really important that you make these short, because if you play them legato and tie them in, the effect is all lost. See? Much better. Now, another way that bassists accent their walking bass lines is by anticipating the one. Mostly it's the one, especially if a new section starts or a new 4-bar unit starts. Like you could go, let's take How High the Moon again. I did a whole lot of them. Usually you would do less to not overuse that effect. And as a conclusion, there is another embellishment that came out with the bassists of the 50s, 60s, 70s, mostly. Niels Henning Ørsted Petersen made a living out of that thing, and that's the falling triplet. The falling triplet goes from your root to a lower note by way of an arpeggio. You work your way up. They're also very nice if they use the flat fifth instead of go up again. Now you need to practice those elements until they become second nature, because if we go on to play melody and these walking bass lines, you have to split your brain between the top melody that everybody hears and a nice bass line that supports it. And that only works if you have it pretty much on autopilot. So practice all those variants over various standards with different kinds of chord progressions that go in the circular fifth, that go in motion of thirds, that go stepwise, and pretty soon you'll build a repertoire. Don't worry yet about the melody, just become sure in what you're doing with your walking bass lines, and then when we go to playing melody, which will be next week, it'll all gonna be falling into place nicely. So, I thank you for listening. Happy practicing, and keep swinging.